1950s when I was born, it was a time of tremendous hope and optimism. There was a lot of expectation that things were going to get better. We expected that we were going to become happier because we were going to be more prosperous. We were going to have untold freedom. As a small boy, I can remember that feeling of the beginning of consumerism. I can remember when we got our first television. I can remember Macmillan saying that we'd never had it so good, and we hadn't seen anything yet at that point. Yet, with all these freedoms and all this access, the thing that puzzles me is that the happiness bit hasn't come about. 2 years ago, I finished writing a book about the psychological state of the nation, putting Britain on the couch. And basically what I'd found was that we are considerably unhappier, more miserable, more violent, more compulsive than we were in 1950. So do you feel anything has changed in Britain since then? Well, since I finished the book 2 years ago, we've obviously had New Labour, a new age has dawned, but despite the optimism of the election, I'm not convinced that New Labour, or in fact any political party, are really doing anything to address this issue of our psychological well-being. In fact, I'm slightly worried that they might even be making things worse. Over the next 5 months, I'm going to go around the country on a journey, meeting people, trying to understand why it is that so many of us would appear to have become more middle class, more affluent, better off materially, but why we don't seem to feel any happier for it. Why it is that so many people who should feel like winners actually, it seems to me, feel like losers. Karen, hiya. Oh God, I wouldn't like to walk around this.
My name's Karen, I'm 32, and I work for a company that produces animated series for TV. I've got a very good job. I'm very well paid, I think, for what I do. I work hard. I've got a lovely boyfriend. I've been going out just over 2 years. We've been together since last year. I've got a lovely flat, a nice 2-bedroom garden flat in Chelsea. I've also got a little cottage in Somerset, which is great. It's a real escape to go to at weekends.
Outwardly, people would say you've got it all.
Yeah, no, this is exactly what I find so confusing about the whole thing. It's like I've set myself goals, I've achieved them, I've done, but I'm sure a lot of people would, if I sort of list my achievements and my current situation, go, oh, I'd give anything to be there. And that, in some way makes it worse, because I think I've got all this and I'm not happy, so what's going to make me happy? Absolutely nothing. So this is it. This is as good as it gets, and I hate it. My job title is head of production, so I oversee budgets and schedules. I love my job. It's been a lifesaver for years and years, because I've always got that area where I go in and I do have confidence when I'm at work. I've never really had trouble in that area. It's the rest of my life that sort of I have self-doubts in. And it's just total self-loathing. That's the way I feel. It's like, you don't deserve anything. You don't deserve food, you don't deserve friends, you don't deserve a job, you don't deserve a flat. It's just, you're just the lowest of the low. You really believe you're the worst person in the entire world. And people that like you are just silly. They're taken in by an act. The real you is this horrible, hateful person that doesn't deserve anything.
What's been the worst that it's got?
I was lying there just wishing I'd die. Just die. Just like that. Just die. Oh, it would be so good. Be the end of everything. All my pain. Or if you could just press a button. Like if someone said, that's a button. If you press it, you die. That would be just the ideal thing. Because actually, physically, cut my wrist, take an overdose, jump off a building or something. I couldn't make myself do that. But I really did want to die. I really, really did. I went to see a GP about, it's that migraine tablets or something, something to figure out, and I just sat down in the chair and just burst into tears, and I couldn't stop. I was there for about 2 hours. And they were trying to find a hospital, and they found a hospital that, would look after me. And I went to the Chelsea Westminster Hospital, and then suddenly I was like, what am I doing here? And they were sort of saying, your GP's very worried about you. If you want you to stay here, and I was going, no, I can't, I've got to go to work tomorrow. They were like, what's more important, your job or your life? I said, my job? It's so silly. And genuinely, that was the right answer to me, and that is how I felt. That did shock me, because I thought, I don't want to end up in hospital. What's happening to me? Why can't I just function like a normal person? At that stage, I think I was on Prozac, but I was only taking 1 tablet a day, and they doubled my dose up, and that made me feel as though I could cope with things, and I felt much more normal. I just felt so much better. I just thought I can cope with anything, I can do anything I want, I'm okay.
Karen's demeanour is typical of a depressed person. She seems very up and fine, but secretly she's filled with self-hatred. Somebody like Karen isn't in the least bit exceptional. There's 500,000 people on Prozac at any one time. The fact that there's been a huge increase in the proportion of the population who are taking antidepressants is partly just because people are more aware of depression and more prepared to own up to it, and GPs are more prepared to throw out the pills. But it's also because there are an awful lot more people who need them. And it's estimated that for every single person who's on antidepressants, there's at least 5 more who would qualify for a diagnosis that would mean they should be on antidepressants. There's a lot of people out there who are suffering in private and being kept going by taking pills. As it happens, Karen decided to stop taking Prozac. She's been taking it for 6 months. But I do worry whether her mood will plummet back to where it was before she started taking Prozac.
That's my last Prozac, which I'm about to take. I had a pretty terrible day at work today, but I seemed to deal with it all really well. I didn't take any crisis personally. I think it was all entirely my fault, and just got on with the problem and sorted things out. So I just hope that I'll react like that when I'm not on Prozac, because I don't really want to take it for the rest of my life. It's got me through a very, very sticky patch, but no one wants to take drugs all their lives, so hopefully I'll be feeling better about myself when the Prozac wears off. I don't really know what else to say now. I'm just going to try and talk to the camera as often as I can over the next few months and see what happens, really. I'm going to stop now, if I can.
At any one time, 5% of us are suffering from severe clinical depression. 5% of us are suffering from mild depression, and a further 10% describe depressive symptoms. So 20% of the population are feeling depressed at any one time. With the divorce rate, obviously now it's 40% the divorce rate, whereas it was 12% in 1950. And that's both a cause and an effect of the increase in depression. Suicide has become the second commonest cause of death among young people. the use of illegal drugs like marijuana, cocaine and heroin has exploded. Every week 500,000 Britons are believed to take an ecstasy tablet. All this use of drugs as solace are clear signs that we're more depressed and we're seeking ways of trying to alleviate a depressed mood.
Right, hopefully it's working again. I've now been off Prozac for 2 weeks and I feel great. I feel like someone's taken my shield away. I don't feel as invulnerable as I did. I'm starting to get very anxious about situations that while I was on Prozac just, wouldn't worry me. I'd be okay about. And I'm starting to think sort of very negative things about myself that I don't know. I mean that's what I've always been like, and it felt strange not to worry about everything.
Well, I think what's interesting is that it's not just the socially deprived people in society who, possibly got quite a lot to be depressed about, who are more depressed compared with 1950. It's also the winners, the people at the top of society who, seem to have it all. People like Karen, who outwardly would appear, attractive, with a good job, appear to be doing very well. And yet many more of them are feeling depressed compared with 1950. And I think that to understand why we're more depressed overall, the key to understanding that is probably going to be to understand why it is that so many of the winners in our society feel like losers. Do you have high standards?
Very. I can't make a mistake. I mean, even if other people are like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm upset. I don't make mistakes, I can't.
In a sense, who's making these judgments? Where are they coming from?
Well, it's me. I hate making mistakes. And there's no need for them, that's the way I see it. You can do everything right.
But you know that's not
No,
true.
I don't, Oliver. You can do everything right if you prepare. No, you can. No, it's like everything you do. Like if you go out and forget your keys, you didn't have to do that. You could have remembered your keys.
But it's not just at work.
Oh no, it's everything. I can't go out and not say enough money. I can't borrow money. I can't ask for a light from people. I hate it. I'm so unworthy of anything. I've got to be perfect, otherwise people dismiss me straight away.
Did you have to be perfect as a child?
Yeah, I couldn't drop. I remember once I dropped a pint of milk, and Mum was so cross with me. She gives me doing it deliberately, and in school, I did well academically at school. I got 16 O levels, 4 A levels.
Nice.
But no, they weren't all A's though, so not very good.
That
Mum
was
wasn't.
fun.
No, Mum wasn't pleased. If I got 80% and came first, that was good. But if I got 80% and came fourth, that wasn't good. It's like you had to be the best. When I won a scholarship to my senior school, I knew I was up then. I mean, it was. I just strive for that feeling again because they just look at me and such. They're so happy, and I just tried to get that back.
Well, I mean, the main point is that Karen lives with the fear of failure every day because she doesn't live up to this extraordinarily high standard that ostensibly she set herself, but has really been set her by the wider society as much as her family. And what worries me is that there already are millions of Karens. But worse, my suspicion is that for every Karen there's going to be 10 in 10 years' time. The high achievers, got it all, and yet They always feel they've got to do better than they do. Because compared with 1950, the gap between what people expect from life and what reality can actually deliver has become a yawning gulf. And I suspect that the place in British society where you can actually see this operating most clearly is in our schools.
And I challenge those who in our schools. There is no task more important than yours. For in your hands lies the future of our children. There are too few good, safe schools, too much tolerance of mediocrity, too little pursuit of excellence. So when later this year we propose the most fundamental reform of the teaching profession since state education began, where there will be increased rewards but tied to higher performance, help us get it through.
Well, I think it's great that New Labour's spending £19 billion on education. But what I'm not so sure about is whether the government understands that there are fundamental values, problems of psychology, if you like, in continuing to try and increase the amount of assessment, the amount of competition. In places like Dulwich College, which is right at the top of the league table, I imagine expectations are going to be very, very high because a high proportion of last year's Dulwich students got straight A's in all their GCSEs. You've got to wonder what this year's crop of students are going to be feeling when they compare themselves to that.
The comparison with the other chaps, it's a kind of friendly competitiveness that drives us all to do better.
What results specifically are you hoping for?
I won't pretend to be the world's greatest academic high flyer, although I can pull my weight in some subjects. For example, I'm hoping to do really well in English. What's important for me is to get back into the college, and to get back in I'll require 6 Ps. Beyond that, a bonus really.
I've always been a bit of a linguist, really. French, Spanish, that sort of thing. I'm aiming for star days, hopefully. And then, again, in the sciences, if I get A's, I'll be very happy. I think it's not quite a matter of life or death, but it's close.
That's why I'd be disappointed to get a B. I'd like 6 A stars more.
In what ways do you feel the pressures applied to you at school to do well?
The people at the top are a very high standard, and you've got to work very hard to keep at the top, even though the exams become obsolete within a couple of years. They're the first stepping stone in a whole series of them. Talking about my entire life here.
We want him to succeed, and if he doesn't achieve what his teachers and he and we have hoped for, it will be disappointment for him, not for ourselves, because his disappointment will be felt more keenly by him.
When I was at school, it never even crossed my mind that I wouldn't stay on into the sixth form and go on into higher education. Whereas now you've got to prove yourself at each level before you'll be allowed to proceed to the one after that. And that seems to me to be putting more pressure on success at 16 in order to have the opportunity for success at 18.
What personal fears do you have for the future?
Failure.
Basically my fear is that I'll just kind of give up a bit.
I just don't want to be a failure, you know. Simple as that.
Can there be too much pressure?
I'm sure.
Oh, yes. I mean, it sort of blows you apart from inside, doesn't it, that pressure in the end?
As a child, and certainly as she grew up, it happened more and more. She literally lit up a room. She was like a shining star. You knew when she was around that things would happen, that you'd laugh. If you wanted to be serious, she'd be serious. She just was an enormous giver of good things. She was naturally so capable that there weren't a lot of places in which she did fail. She couldn't fail because she was naturally so very capable. However, as the years went on, the expectations to always be the shining star, I think, became quite hard for her.
It appeared so effortlessly to people who saw it. But that isn't always the case, is it?
So, how did you feel when she got into Oxford?
I was very proud for her.
We were proud. I mean, I think because it's a great symbol, isn't it? I mean, it's supposed to be, Oxford is supposed to be the pinnacle of achievement, you know. And we learned some things about it later, which were quite disquieting. But at that time, we thought it was wonderful.
We met in Freshers Week, which was my first week here in Oxford. And the first time I saw her was when she stood up in the union and gave a speech. And I'd also given a speech, and the two of us won the 2 prizes. She had a very special quality that made, through which she could make lots of people feel very important.
What sort of person would she, if she was sitting here now, how would she be as a person?
Very smiley. She's very lively, larger than life, very vivacious.
At school, she was such an amazing exemplar. And then you go from there, just height, you know, as everybody says, then you go to Oxbridge and you realize that everybody's like that. And it's quite a shock because you thought you were the one or among the few, and then all of a sudden everybody's among the few. But it didn't seem to stop her from starting it over again, you know.
She was social secretary of the college, and then she was vice president of the college and in charge of welfare. She completely rehauled the welfare system within our college and wrote all the handbooklets. She was involved in thespian activities. She was captain of the women's rugby team. She was a counsellor at Nightline, and she was a brilliant scholar. There were instances when she did, express her self-doubt.
Her description vis-a-vis trying to revise for exams was that she had cotton wool in her head. She found it extremely difficult to deal with something that she had been very used to doing, to now deal with the fact she couldn't put the words that she wanted on the page. And because there isn't continual assessment there, because everything depends on this third-year Beecher's Brook, the amount of work she had to do was absolutely horrendous.
We would go to libraries and she would read 2 pages, and it would take her 3 hours to read 2 pages because she wouldn't be thinking about the work she was doing there and then. She'll be thinking about the sheer volume that she had to get through and thinking, I can't do this, I can't do all these things. And it would stop her doing anything at all.
She was unraveling. I mean, that was
Unraveling all over the place.
we were hopelessly inadequate. I mean, and everybody else around here was hopelessly inadequate because they were trying to help her in some ways get through her third year exams. I mean, you know, as we were operating on that level, well, you know, just do this, do that, try this, try that, and we're just wholly inadequate. I mean, she was in a different place. I had a business meeting in London on the Wednesday and was going to come up and see her on Thursday. We were supposed to have lunch together, and we talked during the week, and she sounded all right. And I came up Thursday morning, and she didn't show to our meet where we were supposed to meet. And then I went to where we were supposed to have lunch. She didn't show there, and she didn't answer her phone. So I took a taxi to her lodgings, and when the taxi came around the corner, there was an ambulance waiting there. I had a sinking feeling, and went in and was stopped by an ambulance man who turned out to be the most sensitive person in Oxford. I can tell you that right now. If I ever see him again, I'll give him a big hug. But he was very sensitive, and I said, "Is she all right?" And he said, "No." So he said, "There's been a terrible tragedy." And I said, "Is she all right?" And he said, "No, she's dead." I think she knew. That all the things she had done in the past, she couldn't do anymore. And she couldn't be creative and imaginative. I feel that killed her soul. And while I was coming by to just put an end to that and say, forget it, forget the exams, we're going home, we'll sort it all out later, I feel she might have felt I was going to take her home.
We're in Botanical Gardens in Edinburgh, going towards my sister's bench. Sort of sits here with a view of the city, which is kind of what Sarah would have wanted. Made from elm wood with a, you can see, pretty unusual design. Sort of reflects that Sarah was an individual, which is partly why we had it made this way. It has a plaque made from stone. It's a Chinese symbol for love. This little rhyming couplet. In my opinion, well, I try not to think about it, to be honest. One of the main reasons she died was she didn't want people to be upset she failed her exams. And the ironic thing is, she was worried about failing her exams, but she couldn't fail her exams. She was one of those people who, whatever they tried to do, could not fail an exam. But, you know, the way she felt was different from the way she was. And that's, I guess, what in the end killed her.
But living with failure would be more difficult than not living. That must be the way in which people see it, in which they're saw it.
Did you find it puzzling that this terribly able woman could imagine she was going to be a failure? Did it seem strange?
No, not at all. Particularly as it got closer to finals, most of us were sort of battling against the fear of getting a 2-2, and those predicted first also battling against the fear of getting a 2-1. And we were all filled with self-doubt and fear. You know, you can cut the atmosphere overnight. Lots of instances of people taking too many sleeping pills the night before and not being able to get down to school.
From 1990 to 1997, there were 12 suicides at Oxford, 10 of which were third-year students. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to think there might be a correlation between final year exams, these draconian exams, and people killing themselves.
While Oxbridge is quite happy to say that we grow rare orchids with which we win many glittering prizes, they have failed to see or to deal with the conditions under which those orchids are growing. And if you want to capitalize on the gifts, then you also have to look after the vulnerability.
I don't think it's recognized. The mix of students has changed. The pressures have changed. The competitiveness has changed. The whole atmosphere has changed. It's not do you get a degree, but what degree did you get? Did you get a first? Oh, if you didn't get a first or you didn't get a 2.1, you can't go to graduate school. You can't go to the city. You can't get this passport. You can't get that passport. So it's this incredible pressure that is self-induced and put on by the university.
And when you look back now, what do you feel?
I get incredibly angry with her because I think, you know, it's all over now and he would still be here and, you know, life goes on. Whatever class of degree you get, whether you get a degree, and there were more important things. There are more important things and she should be here to experience them.
I suppose I feel that Sarah's death was a somber tragedy with virtually no redeeming features unless we learn something from it. It's not that compared with 1950 that there were more vulnerable people going to Oxford. But if Sarah had gone to Oxford in 1950, there's no way she would have committed suicide. There's no way that having to jump the Beaches Brook at finals would have seemed so awesome to her that she actually would prefer to die. Unless it's recognised that we're doing this to the most able people, making them feel so utterly useless unless they succeed at ridiculously high standards, we're going to see a lot more Sarahs in the future.
I've now been on Prozac for absolutely ages, and I just feel crap, really. I feel fed up, tired, grumpy. It's not much fun. I don't like myself. I feel very insecure. Maybe that will change. I hope it does. I don't know. Everything's too hard. Everything's likely to be taken away from me at any minute. And I can try and pretend everything's okay, but it's not really okay.
I won't pretend to be the world's greatest academic high flyer, What's important for me is to get back into the college. To get back in, I'll require 6 Bs.
Bring the notepad, bring the notepad. Bring the notepad.
It's all right.
BB, A star, A star, B, A, B, B, B. 2 A stars. That really is quite something.
Am I allowed to say well done?
Many, many times. You can give me lots of money.
I'm aiming for star days, hopefully. I think it's not quite a matter of life or death, but it's close.
So much. And then I'll be back after that. No, please, you don't.
The nerves have been building up more and more. I've been thinking about specific subjects and how I could have done in them. The waiting's over now. I'd like 6 A stars or more. Put it this way, I'd be disappointed to get a B. Did much better than I expected. I got 8 A stars, the rest A.
I ended up with the full quota is 6 star days, 4 A's and a B, which I'm very pleased with, really. The B is in physics, but then, as I say, the sciences were never my strong point, and I've got 2 A's in them and 1 B, and I'm really delighted to have done that well in them, really.
It was great to see you so happy of getting the results. But the curious thing I noticed was that quite a lot of people got much better results than you.
Excuse me.
Their reaction was, minimal. They didn't seem to be that thrilled at all, and some of them actually seemed unhappy just because they snapped, only got 1 B or something out of all the rest A's, but they didn't care.
Maybe, it's so important to them. If I had, though, to be honest, if I'd spent, 6 months in the run-up to those exams, working every night for hours and hours and hours, I wouldn't perhaps have been quite so happy with what I got.
If I got all B's, I'd have been completely distraught. I really didn't think of that as an option of what could have happened. I'd sacrifice a lot of my A stars rather than get a B. 1 solitary B, which sticks out as a sore thumb as your weak subject.
I'll be celebrating this evening.
If you're aiming for the top, and quite frankly, you expect yourself to get the best, there's nowhere you can go after that. You can't go up from that. There's nothing that is really going to sort of really please you. There's no pleasant surprise. So you've got to have somewhere for your aspirations to grow to.
I've got 2 B's and 2 D's.
You've got to also at some point remind yourself of all those thickos that are doing worse than you, so you've got some reason to celebrate. Because that's what you work for. You work for the celebration and the satisfaction of doing well.
Oh man, look at that. Good you got on your phone, man. I haven't got the foggiest idea, Sam, but I did it. Because I'm a genius.
If you don't do as well as your friends comparatively, or even as well as your personal standard you set yourself, it doesn't matter what 99% of the countries that you've never met get. It matters what you and the people around you set themselves as targets.
So you could be a winner and end up feeling like a loser, a winner in terms of the rest of the population.
Exactly, yeah.
In Mark's case, he seemed fine, but it is very scary. the mindset that he has, which he's been forced to have by the system, and is the same mindset as the one that Karen and Sarah Knappert had. Namely, as with all depressives, they think, they compare themselves to very, very high standards. They completely ignore the fact that there's lots of people worse than them. It's not what I'm saying Mark's depressed, but if you wanted to design a system to make people depressed, that would be the system you'd design, one where people were always pitching for something they couldn't achieve, and in which they got no satisfaction from what they did achieve. Well, these are my reports in my O-level term. Got geography here. He's completely disorganised an approach which shows in ceaseless mistakes and clumsy map work, and at the moment one cannot have much hope for his chances at O-level. We've got maths here. Quite a few of the members of this very poor class are making a real effort to master the basic syllabus, but James is hardly one of them. In school he does not seem to know what serious concentration is. I think what's important about this is that, perhaps the sort of charitable euphemism to me is that I was a late developer. Some people would just say I was a selfish, antisocial little shit. But, and actually, I was allowed so many second chances, and eventually I did buckle down, and eventually I did manage, God knows how, to get into Cambridge. No chance of that happening nowadays. Somebody who, as errant and all over the place as I was when I was young, would be cold. Not only is there a tendency to cull late developers as early as possible, there's also now a lot of pressure to create early developers. What did you say you wanted to be when you grew up? Doing what? Flying a red arrow, rather than flying people in airliners around the world. You don't want to do that.
I think he was probably about 3 when he first started messing around with the laptop, wasn't he? And he's reading and writing fairly well. He's only been at school a week and a half, so he obviously does, have quite a good retentive mind, etc.
Why do you think computers are important though at that age?
I think we're in a competitive world, and he needs an edge, and things have got to be on your CV for you to be looked at and considered, quite frankly, otherwise it just doesn't even get to the shortlist. And people know that in real life, in all aspects of work and what they're doing. So it's trying to instill it as early as possible. Is there a middle ground anymore in life? It's either success or failure.
And what sort of passport have you got? Have you got bronze?
When I'm older, I think I'm going to get silver, and then I'm going to get gold.
So what about Maisie?
If it suits her to do the same, then we'll do the same for her, but if it doesn't, then...
Is she doing anything yet?
No, she's only 16 months, so...
So is there an age when it's too young, do you think, to be starting any kind of...
They've got to have understanding, and really it's up to the parents to know when that understanding happens, because you're with them all the time. You know when your child is starting to understand, and when they're starting to understand and you can communicate with them, then maybe it's time that you could perhaps think about doing something. And if the Americans want to give us computerisation or bring it right down to sort of like the youngest common denominator, then that's fine by me. Maybe we can have a Bill Gates of the future.
Is that one? Terry and Judy are obviously extremely well-meaning, very nice people, but you do slightly wonder why it's necessary to start at such a young age. There's no evidence that if you start very, very young, that this is going to result in a genius or a very high-achieving long-term child. There is, a massive amount of pressure now on parents to create good employees. And the way you create a good employee is by creating somebody who pleases the examiner. It's all very, very convenient to advance capitalism to have good employees, but I don't think it's at all in the interest of our children. And if there were league tables, not just of academic achievement at schools, but also of how psychological state that these children are also in, rates of depression, rates of eating disorders and so on, I think, that would be a much more full audit of what the education system is doing. Because let's not forget that most children leave the education system feeling like failures, even if they're successful.
Now been at Prozac 6 months. I've started seeing a cognitive analytical therapist who's really nice. I really like her, and she's very sympathetic to talk to, and I look forward to seeing her because it's always useful. I always take something away that helps me that week. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
All right. I have a character who had to come on looking for somebody and he hasn't been able to find him.
I know when I start to feel terrible, I can work out why, and so then if those feelings strike, I just think, no, I'm not going to feel that like that, and I think it will become a habit, and eventually I'll just react completely normally. That's the plan anyway. I hate doing video diaries.
I'm on my way to visit Karen at her weekend cottage, and I don't know what sort of state she'll be in necessarily. I mean, the fact that she seemed to be a lot happier 4 weeks ago doesn't mean she still will be. But, I'm looking forward to finding out. I'm looking forward to seeing whether, just 10 sessions of therapy could actually affect her emotional well-being. Because she was going downhill fast after she stopped taking the Prozac. There we are. Hi, Jamie. Hi. Hiya. Hi, Karen. Oh, yes, please. How long have you had this, Karen?
Was it a year ago now?
Oh, right.
Because when Jamie moved up to London, because he's been born and brought up in the country, he didn't want to live in London 7 days a week, so we bought this to come to at weekends, which is really nice. And it's a really nice small village. I really like it.
And how's the therapy been going?
I feel much stronger. I feel I'm a stronger person now than I was. And as on Prozac, nothing was upsetting me. It's not the same thing.
Treating the cause rather than the symptoms, I guess, which is...
Yeah, it's sort of given me armour to fight things off, which...
the therapy has?
Yeah, whereas Prozac was just a shield, and just stop things hurting me.
And when I first talked to you, you talk about sort of that you couldn't stand the idea of making mistakes and so on. And is that something that you've worked on with the therapist about, how sort of perfectionism?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd make a mistake during the week and go and see her, and she'd say, I'd describe the situation to her, and she'd go, well, what was so terrible about that? And I'd say, because everyone will think I'm terrible now, and it's like, they didn't. It was just me. And so that's what I meant by just cutting my worries down. I just say, yes, okay, I could have handled that better, but I didn't, and it's done now, and I can get on with my life.
It almost sounds as though your life is plagued with the idea that you ought to be, or wanted to be, something that you weren't.
Definitely. I thought, if only I was perfect, then everything in my life would be fine. And I think I just took a step back and realised my life was actually pretty nice. The therapist keeps saying, God, you're such a fast learner. But it's just been, at last, this is what I needed. I mean, I've always did have a great job, a great boyfriend, a great flat, everything. But it's like that's making me happy now.
I don't mind admitting I'm quite surprised that Karen's so much better, actually. I feared that she was probably going to have more pills. But it seems though in her individual case that therapy seems to be really working, which is wonderful. Doesn't necessarily tell us though that that's the solution for the whole of our society. Well, what interests me is that you see people like Karen, you hear this dreadful story of Karen Apple, and you might think, well, these just outrageously high achievers who've got nothing to do with the rest of the population. But I feel that they actually tell us a lot, because they seem to be people who are immensely dissatisfied with themselves. And I don't think that's unique to high achievers. I think that's an extremely widespread problem in the society of people comparing themselves to others and finding themselves lacking. It's affecting our deep psychology. You know, there's a manufacturing of depression, of low self-esteem, of self-loathing, of feeling of failure, which is coming from this. Which has nothing to do with early childhood or genes. This is something that's completely changed since 1950. It's the wider society pressurising it, and I think that's what I'd like to look into next, to see how consumer culture via the mass media may be poisoning our minds.